So we're just going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it over to the rapping professor. We are definitely blessed to have today WURD here and interviewing and sharing with us, and any exposure, not just any, this exposure is very necessary. So the topics that we talk about here impact our community but aren't widely talked about. So we want to make sure that we have a platform where we can have this conversation openly amongst us, and we're very grateful to have this opportunity today with WURD. So I'm gonna pass this over now to the rapping professor.
Hello, everybody. I don't know how much fun we're supposed to be having tonight, but I just can't help myself. So we're gonna do a little more smiling than you might have prepared to do. I'm gonna do an introduction for the show, then I'm gonna hand it over to former state representative, and we're gonna conduct business as usual. So I'm just gonna do a brief introduction for, which camera should I go to, Mike? You go there. All right. Welcome, everybody. It is the Rapping Professor Show on the go. We are here live having a more serious discussion than usual. We are in the community, and I'm going to let former Representative Waters just describe some of the things we're going to take place tonight. And I want you to just share the information tonight that you receive, because I am positive that we are going to help some people tonight.
Thank you, Rapping Professor, also known as Aaron Smith. I really appreciate the chance to dialogue with you. I'm a big fan of yours. I enjoy listening to you for the time that you was on the morning show on WURD. I learned a lot, and I'm quite sure that anyone who listened to it will agree that you are just full of wisdom, full of information. And I think that you could maybe go on Jeopardy. That guy who won all that money on there, I'll tell you, I used to wonder about you. I said, maybe you could go on there, give him a run for his money, okay? But nonetheless, I really appreciate your knowledge and your experiences that you have shared with us openly for our benefit. The show tonight that we're going to talk about is some of the effects, as Kirsten had already mentioned, some of the effects that go along with the incarceration, and particularly mass incarceration. But my experience as a legislator for years, I always wondered why we had the mass incarceration to the level that we had, and what benefit are we getting out of that? And I had a chance to go up to SCI Graterford and other institutions to go visit and talk to the inmate populations up there. And I found out that there's a lot of resourceful people that are being held in some of those facilities. I also found out that some of them, in spite of the fact that they are still incarcerated, they already are ex-offenders. They have changed, and some of the changes that were made were changes that they made on their own. And they decided that they had enough, and they was just looking for another opportunity to come out and show that they are much better than the person who went inside. And how could they come back out and work as a law-abiding citizen and then pay their debt back to society? Unlike what we call the incarceration, I don't know why they say that they are paying a debt to society when they're incarcerated. No, taxpayers are paying that. Taxpayers are the ones that are paying that. They pay their debt back to society when they help heal the community that they once harmed. Okay, so they have some dynamic people up there who just wanted an opportunity to show that they could do something of benefit, so they could make their family proud, so that they could make themselves proud, and show that they still have something to offer. And there was a few programs that came out of SCI Graterford, which happens to be the 5th largest maximum security facility in the nation. And many people say they got some of the toughest guys that are housed there, but they also have some people who have changed and only looking for an opportunity to show their true worth. So we have some great programs, and I would love to share some of those programs that came out of SCI Graterford with the blessings of the Department of Corrections. and the fact that as a legislator I was able to get some things done that I probably wouldn't have been able to get done, but because I was a legislator and I was able to get the trust of the department, they was able to give it a chance and take the risk, and at the end of the day I think some good came out of it.
Now, where's Mike? He's not even there. I'll make sure we're recording it. In terms of some of the programs you were able to institute, can you describe some of the things you were able to do as a legislator?
So there was I thank you for the question. There was a series of activities that took place. There was one, most of them was all historical. One was called the Old School, New School Call Out, where the some people believe that going to jail is a rite of passage in our community. It's a sad commentary, but there are too many people that have bought into that, and they don't have much hope, and they don't really know their true value. So many of them go to school, don't go to school, they end up going to jail. One of the leading indicators of people end up incarcerated are people who failed in school. That has been one of the indicators. And then they go to jail and they find out that they could take a GED class, that they can, you used to have nice college classes that they could take there from Villanova and other places.
And vocational certifications, right?
That's exactly right. And then they find out, wow, I could have earned that out here. I didn't have to go there. But that's when they had time to take out and look at themselves. So, but they also said, because so many people look as incarceration as I said, I'll quote that too, as a rite of passage or a way to earn street credibility, that they might be looking up to those guys. So they said, well, since they want to be like us, let us be the ones who talk to them and get them to understand what the true consequences are of being incarcerated. And we had an event called the Old School, New School Call Out. Now they told me, now at the time, rapping professor, I'm going to the Greater Ford, I'm wearing a suit and tie, my normal attire that I wear as a legislator. And they were saying, you know, in spite of your knowing that tough on crime is not getting the results for the community, people still don't feel safe. I'm listening to all my colleagues talk about extending longer sentences in time and more capture for people to enter into the criminal, cross the line, I guess you could say. But that did nothing, in my opinion, but increase the prison population. But people still didn't feel safe in the community. So they said, let us talk to them. Give us a chance where we could talk to them. And we worked out this event called the Old School, New School Call Out. It took a little while to put it together.
Now you would bring the young people to the facility?
No, we didn't do that. So this is how we did it. It was a risk that was involved, and the guys told me, give them a chance. We was able to find a facility that we could bring the young people to. We worked with the PAL organizations, we went to the barbershops, we went to the program for where the men work with children. Marcus Allen has his program. I can't think of it right now what it's called. But we work with the different institutions where children go to, young people go to. Okay. And we was able to have them bring young people into the Community College of Philadelphia. Okay. We had the blessings of the college to be able to host that event. And the event took place on January 15th, 2007. Now, I heard somebody say, does January 15th ring a bell? Martin Luther King's birthday. It just happened to be that year that January 15th fell on a Monday. So it was not only his birthday, but it was the same day it was being observed. And we was very happy how that happened. And we had, I don't know, maybe about 3,000 people who showed up to the gymnasium and was able to hear the men live inside the fifth largest maximum security facility in the nation. Wow. Some of the toughest of the tough guys, and I know that because people came to me and said, how did you get these guys to do this? How could you get them to admit that some of the things that they did, they wish that they could go back in time and undo those things. Mm-hmm. And rather than them going up there and being tough and saying, "Oh, I'm Joe Blow from Geronimo. I got street cred. You know who I am." They took it low and said, "Don't do that." And matter of fact, they challenged the people in the community who was there to go back to their neighborhoods and to talk some sense into these young people, to get them out of that risky behavior that causes people to be victimized in their own communities. And let's try to work on educating the people the young people.
Now, in terms of the education component, there's such a pull. Like just growing up in a city like this, it's such an undeniable pull towards the negative aspects of life in institutions. I remember watching When They See Us. If anybody got to watch that Ava DuVernay special about the Central Park 5, there's such, Brother Ishan could probably attest this as well, just minding your business and being young and being black, like you really just have to always prove that you're not the ones that they're looking for. And I mean, like 90% of my interaction, if it wasn't a family member with any degree of law enforcement, it's just like, I'm fitting the description, it wasn't me, hopefully I say the right thing, hopefully I don't have anything on me, if not, my whole life could be destroyed in an instance. And just the stress that reality produces. The way that we used to walk around, like, as predators just hoping not to become prey. We started to even dress like the stick-up kids to not get stuck up. You see people even in classrooms now when I go to high schools with their headphones on and their hoods on, and I see it like a cloak of protection. They are just like young people that are afraid because they understand that their friends are being railroaded into prison and being beat up and jumped and robbed and being shot by police. So it's so difficult to get through to a young person and just hopefully have him appeal to his more righteous senses, when the world around him, he doesn't see the adults being as active as the institutions that are trying to destroy him. They see more money there. They see more people, more opportunity. They see greater degrees of construction. There are schools that I talked to Superintendent Height that still have asbestos down the hall. And last I checked, when they removed asbestos, they had on hazmat suits. I talked to the superintendent and they're saying, well, they don't go in that area of the building. And with all due respect, to the superintendent and everything he's trying to do, if I'm a young person and I see a brand new jail like the Phoenix Project, the second biggest state project in the history of Pennsylvania, second to the Convention Center, and my school, lead paint and asbestos, and they taking out programs and taking out security and taking out counseling, like what does a normal person, perceive as far as what is of value? And if everybody I see around me is focused on getting money over everything else. The reason why mom can't attend these meetings is because she got to work 2 jobs. The reason why my brother's locked up, he was trying to get money. The reason why people aren't interested in education is because there's not a lot of money in that, but there's a lot of money in privatized prisons. If I take a note and a cue from the history of the country, what they do, come and steal everything and then just decide it was right. If I go out and do that in my neighborhood, I'm persecuted. Yeah. If I behave like America, if I go ahead and be Christopher Columbus and say, this is my block, the same way they did when they came here, right? If anybody got a problem with it, they gonna have to see me and my boys. This is American history. I come to somebody else's territory, I decide it's mine, I claim everything for me, and anybody that got a problem with it, they gonna either get down or lay down. So you either fight for America or you get rolled over. So if somebody with some knowledge says, hold up, that's how they got it? That's how it works around here? And then everybody just falls in line because I don't see nobody outside protesting. Everybody going to work like this thing ain't stolen, right? So the smart, some of the most brilliant minds among us, like Freeway Ricky Ross, who could have been running Fortune 500 companies, could have been the next Reginald Lewis, like Big Meech. These people with some of the best minds are looking around like, wait, I gotta peep this game. This is a hustle. Everybody's acting like it's not a hustle and telling me not to hustle, but it looks like they all hustling. Because the teachers don't look like they're here to educate. The cops don't look like they're here to protect. And everybody involved with this prison and this court system look like they're here just to make money. So it's so difficult when good-hearted people like yourself get in positions where they want to make a change, but we're working against so much institutional racism and corruption. Where you got judges selling kids for kickbacks, putting them, in these programs, Kids for Cash program. Right. What do you tell a young person that is living in the midst of this hypocrisy and hopelessness. Because when I go to 48th Street, it gets more and more difficult to say, hey, just do the right thing, kids. And they looking like, man, the only reason why I got a chance is because I got some money while I was on the outside and I can afford representation. If I didn't have money and I got picked up, my whole situation would be different. Because they look at me like, man, I would have had a public defender. So you telling me when I go back out, I should just, I don't know, work for $8 an hour and run the risk of somebody fitting the description and grabbing me? Or should I stack my money and at least when they grab me, I did something wrong and I can at least get back out on the street? Because there's so many people languishing right now because they can't afford $200 and $300 bails. And if I know 5 of my friends are sitting in prison because they ain't got $500, the first thing I'm going to do is go get $500. And there's not too many ways for 14, 15, 16-year-old people to get $500. Right. But I just always try to figure out a way to crack through this matrix, to crack this code, and try to get them to understand. One of the most impactful things I've been able to share with them is the fact that it is a hustle, but they're getting hustled. They're on the bottom of this totem pole. When I go to 48th Street and I say, look at the concrete, that's a multi-million-dollar contract. All of the electric that you see is a multi-million-dollar contract. The lights, the glass, when you see somebody order 700 windows, you know, of that industrial strength cap, that's a multi-million-dollar contract. When you see the gates open and shut by computers, somebody has to maintain those programs and those hard drives and those computers. When you see people with uniforms on, they had to order, you know, uniforms and handcuffs and batons and tasers. These are multi-million-dollar contracts. And I say, you the one that was sitting out there with your cousin getting killed and you was out there till 3 o'clock and they took all your money from the lawyer. I said, if you're going to be a hustler, then be a hustler and stop getting hustled. Wow. That's one of the types of things I can say to them. So they be like, wow, oh, hey, you making some sense. I said, yeah, because you're the only one out there getting shot. I'm sitting in my law office waiting for you to call me so I can take all the money that you took all the risk for. Wow. Then you come in here and you work for a few cents an hour or a day, right? I'm charging you $6 for oodles and noodles. I charge you $5 for a phone call. I ship you all over the United States. The bus is making money. The watchtower man making money. The firearms industry making money because everybody got to have a gun. I said, you the only one in here taking all the risk, and you the only one in here working, and you the only one in here not making money. Wow. And then they start looking at me a little different. So I say, when you get back out, I encourage you to keep hustling, but not hustle backwards. And there's a level of neglect because we're going to open it up to the community in a minute after my good brother gets the opportunity to share. They have no regard for the residual negative impacts of incarceration. When there's a shooting in a school, they say, we're going to send counselors out. Because we know everybody's been negatively affected by this, and people must really be going through some things. Because just because you're not the one in the cage, if you love that person, there's some things you need to deal with and work through. They don't send anybody to the community. They'll come snatch up 15 people one night and never even come amongst the community who they know are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens and say, hey, we know we came and grabbed y'all uncles, y'all sons, y'all nieces, y'all nephews, y'all brothers. We have some available resources for you because we care about your well-being and your sanity and your mental health and safety. The fact that they'll be willing to snatch people out and work them for nothing and never even have conversations with people. Even when you go down to these facilities and ask to see or speak to your people, you know the way they talk to us. You gotta be a lawyer and surprise them or something, or be, you know, your uncle gotta be a police officer, and then they totally change up and regard you as human. And to me, even that is insulting. In closing, I got a lot of friends that are in law enforcement, and I joke with them all the time because they have those courtesy cards. They got badges for your license plate. They got little pins you can put in your wallet. And I tell them all the time, I shouldn't need a courtesy card to get courtesy from people who took an oath and obligation to protect me. Right. And they sort of nervously chuckle. I say, but I will take a card. But sincerely, the only reason why I gotta have a card in my pocket is because you and I both know that many times you don't treat people with courtesy or like human beings. Right. And I need to pull out some special access card to be regarded as a tax-paying human being that pays your salary that shouldn't get dragged out of my vehicle or be shot for no reason. And I keep a stack of them because I know how dangerous it is. But yeah, to my good brother. Well, slide down.
What did I walk into?
A great conversation. Right on time. You're right on time.
I'm sorry for being late. Thank y'all. I actually was at a conference in New York, and I love this brother so much, and I appreciate him, reaching out to me and asking me to be here today. That I left the conference early and tried to hustle back here through traffic. So that's the reason why I'm late. But my name is Eric Marsh Sr. What brings me here and my perspective that I bring to this conversation, especially in this particular space and for this particular topic, is one, I am a father, but I've been a father to many children, not just my biological children. And I'm the outreach coordinator for a program called Focus on Fathers. It's a parenting education program. I'm also the co-founder of an organization called the Fathering Circle. And to your point, so just jumping in from what I could pick up, one of the things that I've been working on.
For me, just because we're doing this for the WURD Show on the go.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was on.
Give me website information and any social media for your organization, and we'll get right into it.
Absolutely. So www.focusonfathers.org and www.thefatheringcircle.wordpress.com. Those are the websites for my two organizations. And you can reach me at emarsh@phmc.org. I actually had the honor of being interviewed by you about PHMC and HPC around black health disparities, maybe at the beginning of the year, end of the year. But what I was going to share with you to address that issue that you say about folks coming into our communities in the middle of the night and snatching up brothers and uncles and fathers and not addressing the trauma that they cause is I'm co-coordinating an event that's coming up on June 23rd, which is a Sunday, at Edward T. Steele School in Nicetown, specifically to address trauma and unaddressed trauma and violence, right? And so what we want to do is we want to provide the community with access to resources, ongoing resources. So we've partnered with organizations like DBHIDS, Network of Neighbors Against Violence, and a host of others. But specifically because we live in a culture and a society that's not addressing these traumas that it inflicts, right? And so from the standpoint of fathers and fatherhood, you know, I started to share a bunch of statistics around the impact that fathers have on children's well-being. You know, if you don't know, research it, look it up, right? The evidence is there that fathers lead to, you know, higher literacy rates in children, better self-confidence, long-term resiliency to deal with peer pressure, stress, all sorts of numbers of things. There's a different way that fathers interact with their children than mothers do. And so just the fact that a child has access to two human beings, that's the first thing. But the fact that they have access to masculine and feminine, male and female, gives that child a broader foundation than when they don't have access to both people. And it sounds simplistic, but the reality is that it is fundamental to a healthy society, right? And so when we wonder why our children are running rampant the way they are, why the society is the way it is, why I was just at the Constitution Center a few weeks ago, and it attracts visitors from all over the country. And the reality is, and I have to say, it really pained me, is that I got a chance to sit there in the outside cafe and watch the busloads of children come up and down. And the difference in behavior, the difference in structure, orderliness, even the difference in interaction between the adults and children was extremely noticeable. And unfortunately, it was really, I don't want to say it was just based on race, but it was definitely socioeconomic. Right? And so the amount of input and impact that our children receive in our communities is waning, right? And we know this, right? I'm not trying to say that we are worse parents. No, we're dealing with a lot more stuff than they are, right? We're dealing with so much trauma. And again, it goes back to this conversation that we're having about how our communities have been impacted by white race supremacy, impacted by socioeconomic disparities, health disparities, you name it. And so this conversation that centers fathers, I think, is paramount, right? Because as I mentioned in the work that I do at Focus on Fathers, we do parenting education. And I would love to sit here and tell you that all of our participants come in willingly, eagerly. They travel for miles to find out how to get our classes, but sadly, no. Most of our participants are court mandated. Most of our participants actually drop off after some time. Now, here's the interesting statistic, though. 80% of our participants say that they've actually improved their parenting style once they've come through our class. 85% of our participants say that they have improved relations with their children and the other parent of their children, right? So we know these things impact them positively, but what we're trying to do is get men to see their role differently. And the reality is, I don't put that on men. We can't put that just on men, right? Because society tells us that men are secondary parents. Wow. Society tells us that the man is the second parent. Not just because it's about the fact that women carry the child, right? But it's the fact that when you go to school and it asks for parent information, the majority of schools still have mother listed first. When you go into hospitals, the primary person, of course, when a child is taken in, the mother is the first person, right? Because society is saying that mothers are primarily caregivers and caretakers, and they're the home, right? They're the ones at home. But we know we live in a changing economy. We live in a changing society where how many of the women in here work? Everybody? Everybody, right? And so the reality is that we're not dividing up the roles and responsibility the way we really should be. It took two of us to make that child, right? It takes two of us to raise that child, but I think society is lagging behind in the conversation about the importance of fathers. Not just from the perspective of, well, you made a baby, right? And now it's your responsibility. And typically, when you hear about a father's responsibility or a man's responsibility in relation to children, what is it?
Money.
What is a father's responsibility in relation to children? Money. You got a job. One of the biggest things that I can't stand, because I do parenting education, is if you look across the country and you look at any other parenting education class or program that's for men, 90% of them are either under workforce development, right? Or look at the Cities Rise program. The Cities Rise program is under reentry. What does that tell you about our thoughts and feelings about fathers? You either got a job, or you coming out of jail, or you going to jail, right? That's the way it is. And so I've been really petitioning and struggling to get the fatherhood program, the fatherhood initiative under the Department of Education or the Department of Health. Right? Because that's really what it's about. That's really how we impact the child's lives. And that's the way we should be reframing this conversation about what is the importance of fathers. Because I'm going to tell you from the other perspective, what I was leading to was, and what we do in the class, and actually what happened for me personally in my life, is that my children saved my life. When I say my children saved my life, I mean I was in a deep, deep depression. I used to be a business owner. I ran my own business for 10 years, home, wife, all of that. When all of that fell apart for various reasons, it was my children that saved me. It was the fact that I couldn't get up out of bed most of the days, and I kept the windows and the curtains drawn and all of that, but it was when it was time for the kids to go to school, and my wife at the time was on her way to work, I had to take them to school. And it was my children that said, Daddy, won't you come in and eat breakfast with us? Daddy, won't you come into the school and sit down in the lunchroom with us, right? And by doing that and interacting with those children and seeing how they valued me, that I had some value. This is the thing, think about it. I ran my own business for 10 years. I was a general contractor. I built homes, I worked in historic buildings. I did a lot of work. And I'm not saying to pat myself on the back. I'm saying that men identify with what we do. Right? That's right? We are workers. We want to build something, right? We want to put our hands on something, and we want to earn an income. And so most of us, through socialization, are told that that's where our value lies. And so what happens to a man when all of that is torn down or stripped away from him, right? And so that's basically what was going on with me. After losing all of that, I had to recognize that my children valued something very different than what I valued and what society told me they valued. My children valued me as a human being. They valued my time. Wow. They valued my voice, right? And so we share this with other men and saying, look, it doesn't matter what your net worth is, what's your self-worth, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have in your pocket, how much time do you have to give to that child, right? And so we teach things like the amount of time that you spend with your child, whether it's walking them to school, whether it's making them breakfast, whether it's doing anything like changing the baby. How many women here are mothers and would have loved an opportunity to just sleep through the night and have somebody else get up and feed the baby and change the baby and do things like that, right? And so we talk about that as well. The value of a man is in how he impacts the world around him, including women and children and other men.
I'm gonna open it up and give it Brother Ishan. Just make sure you take the mic so we can hear everybody.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Eric was just saying, I wanted to talk about how do you recover a relationship, and I want my dad to actually speak about this. How do you recover a relationship between father and child when either the father is in prison or the child is in prison? How do you bridge a gap? Or have you had an opportunity to work in those areas to bridge gaps, to bring relationships between fathers and sons, with incarceration as a part of it?
This one here? Okay. Thank you. Good question, Ishan, and I'm really happy about some work that took place up at Greaterford. We wanted to have it in other places too. The program, it was a program called Fathers and Children Together. So, and this was a program that was identified as a need by the men incarcerated. We had two teams. We would go up there, visit, and work on different programs. I talked about one of the highlights, but one of the last programs we worked with was called Fathers and Children Together. And that program dealt with the fact that an inmate took a very careful observation of a visiting room when he was there. And he noticed that in the visiting room, that in most cases, when the mom comes up there, the man's been inside with all these other men, and here come mom coming up there looking all nice and fly, I guess you could say. He's happy to see her. She got the child with her too, though, because that's his son or his daughter. But it's unfortunate, based on what the observation was, the child was on their own. The visit was more between mom and dad. Dad trying to find out what's going on with mom. Where was you when I called the other night? They hug it up with each other, because they know the visit's going to end, and he's going back to his cell, she's going out in the street. So they trying to make the most out of that visit. But what was noticed was that the child was there as almost an afterthought. The child was on their own. And in many cases, the children wound up making friends with other children in the visiting room. Y'all shaking your head, maybe y'all been in some of those visiting rooms. And they looked at it as what an unfortunate opportunity that father still has a responsibility to that child. No matter what his current circumstances are, he needs to make the best out of that child's visit too. And don't treat him like he's not or she's not important. So they had an idea about how could we have, Ishan, to go to your question, how could we have a visit where the mom is removed from the visit? How could we have a visit where now the father has one-on-one communication with his child? So he could, because children, one of the things that we got to realize too, children who has an incarcerated parent are 7 times as likely to go to jail than anyone else. So the likelihood of that child going to jail means that father better spend as much time as he can talking to that child and making sure that child realizes the mistakes that he made and that he wish he could turn his life around, and tell his child, do not under any circumstances follow in my footsteps. So we worked out this plan. We worked out these visits. We worked out these sessions because the fathers have to make sure that if they do have a one-on-one, that the mother agrees to. Because we just don't have visits like that inside of a prison, especially a maximum security prison, where a child comes in there 7 or 8 years old without the mom to have a visit with the father. So we was able to get an agreement with the department so that child could come in there with a surrogate parent. Okay, it was usually someone from my staff. I'm a former legislator, Eric, okay? So usually with some of my staff, or some of the other volunteers who passed all the background checks and everything, to bring that child into a setting. And it was not just one child, it was a cohort. We would get together maybe like 10 children and bring them up there with the mom, but the mom does not go into the visit. The mom goes somewhere else with the other moms. They go have their own visit. The child comes in there now based on the father having went through all these sessions in advance, maybe 6 weeks of sessions, 2 sessions a week, dealing with the effects of a fatherless household. dealing with the effects of what happens if you're not accountable, or your responsibility, or the importance of getting an education. See, all these things that a father, and I really appreciate your comments, all these things that a father really needs to be actively involved with their child's life, because they communicate with their child in a way different than the mother does, but God didn't put them both together without knowing that each one has an important role to play in that child's life. So we was just so happy that we was able to pull this off. And to your answer, Ishan, I can't go into a lot of depth about it right now because there's so much to talk about. But we really was able to get the fathers to step up to the plate, to volunteer to be a part of this, and to make sure that they, even though they had their current circumstances, to make sure that child know, I still love you, you're still my responsibility, and no matter what, I want you to know that I'm a part of your life. Even if it's limited, I'm still in your life, I'm your dad, and I do care about you.
No, I appreciate those comments. One of the things I did want to talk about, we have representatives from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Now, a long time ago, people would say that, it wasn't really popular amongst, members of our community, but we see the statistics are rising in terms of suicide in our community, and I think that it's a conversation long overdue. People are talking about buzzwords like mental health, and they really don't get to the root of some of this trauma that we both discussed, in your comments. I don't see a lot of people giving, especially the young men, an opportunity to share emotionally. You know what I mean? It's not like a typical thing. Like, I remember seeing what they used to call hen circles. Sisters would get together and just say, girl, I'm so tired. People just talk that way. I'm so fed up. They say one thing to me on this job. It'd be a normal conversation. I've had it up to here, and somebody would say, girl, who are you telling? Just yesterday, I had to keep from, you had that opportunity to say, things are bothering me. You get in touch with your own feelings. You get to take a temperature. Other people would, allow you to vent or bounce. You don't see brothers saying, man, I'm tired, man. I'm fed up. They say, did you see that girl? Who you think gonna win? You think that Steph gonna be able? Never getting to even their own feelings, let alone, the root of it, and finding some way to admit, the pain. I seldom have experiences where I seen a brother offer a shoulder to another brother unless somebody literally was killed. Those are the times when people are comfortable just, breaking down and saying it's more than I can handle or stand. So I think it's important, to have these resources available and to share how people in these situations, because there's somebody's gonna be watching this that's just living day to day. People say, I'm living to the end of the week and I'm living check to check. And I know that people, when they deal with, like you said, when people deal with depression, it could be an hour to hour thing. Where 1 hour you might be feeling okay, and an hour later you might be feeling like there's no hope at all. So I really just appreciate for you to just share, some of your background, what brought you here tonight, and just some of the resources that the organization offers. So take your time.
My name is Patricia Duckett. I'm just a volunteer with the society. Danette, she can probably speak a lot more because she serves on the board. I came to volunteer after the death of my nephew. He took his own life when he was about 22 years old. It goes right along with what you were saying, lack of father involvement. His way of showing mental health issues was drinking. Drank heavily. And I don't think people picked that up as a sign of something's going on. They picked it up as a sign of, he just always drinking. Billy's always drinking. But that was his way of coping. The morning that he decided to take his life, we all sat around and talked about it afterwards, of course. He just couldn't take it any longer. He had things going on in his head, and it just one split-second decision, an argument with his girlfriend, and that was it. That was a topper. Before that happened, my own son, who is now 20, thank God. I say thank God because he is 20. He's made it to 20. He had an attempt on his life based around the same types of things. His father was not involved, and he tried his best. I tried my best to get him involved. And so I really appreciate organizations such as yours trying to get people to see that, it's more than about money. Yes, the checks were coming, and that was fine because he was in private school, and I really didn't need it. But more importantly, Zori needed shouldn't have said his name, but he needed that personal one-on-one attention. Just somebody to say, hey, let's go play basketball. Something simple that doesn't cost any kind of money at all. So since I've been volunteering with the foundation, it's just very clear to me that our black men need to seek out someone to talk to. Even if it's just sitting down and just picking up something to drink and just, let the conversation flow. More than sports, but just, slide in there. How you doing? How are you really doing? You know what I mean? And just hopefully a natural conversation can come about, because there's so many men that are just hurting. And it comes across differently in different ways, like drinking, violence, or whatever. And so I enjoy volunteering with the organization because I come across so many people, and just having a casual conversation, you just don't know how many people that you can impact. If you can impact one person just through conversation, it's just that has been, my whole purpose at this point from here on out. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Before the board member speaks, I just wanted to share an anecdote that I always think is really amusing. Have you ever had like a terrible day and you almost like sink into the bad day? Like you don't want anybody to even try to cheer you up. You ever get in that mood where you're like, I don't want nobody to say nothing to me. Like, don't. And there's been times where I get to the store and somebody is so nice. Like I be trying to hold on to my bad day, and I try to give them a little bit of my bad day to take them off their nice square. And they be like, well, thank you, and just thank you for, and they keep it going. I'm like, I was trying to have a bad day, and here you go, smiling and thanking me so many darn times. And within, like you said, you never know, especially when you see somebody who seems to be a little bit aggressive or disagreeable. So now when I started working in retail, I remember as a graduate student, I was thinking this is a ministry. Because if you're going to come and be mean to somebody who's giving you food and helping you out and smiling, I'm not doing anything for you but what you came in here to get. And if you got an attitude with me, this is my opportunity to try to love on you just a little bit so that maybe you don't take it forward. But it was amazing to see how the same way somebody, like you said, in a split second could change somebody's whole life in a negative way, that we have the power and potential, through our kindness and through our concern to have a positive impact. But yes.
Can I just want to add to that too, right? So when I mentioned that I was coming from a conference, the conference in New York was of multicultural masculinities, right? And so understanding what masculinity is, and I think at the root of what we're talking about is this idea, and forgive me because it's a cliche and a lot of people are tired of the term, but this idea of toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is that thing that says that boys don't cry, you can't express your emotion, you don't talk about anything other than sex and sports, right? And you don't show any sign of weakness. And so we have to dismantle all of that if we're going to save our young boys, right? That's the fact. That's what it's all about. Right? So when you have a young man or a little boy, and actually I just shared an article about this where I was in another workshop at some point in time, and it was a black male psychologist there. And somebody shared a statistic about when males or when typically black boys show depression. And he was like, oh no, it's much higher than that. And I was like, here's this brand new article that just came out that said that black males exhibit signs of depression at the age of 5.
Wow. I believe it.
Do you understand? It is, so not only is this issue of suicide becoming more and more prevalent in the black and African American and black and brown communities, but depression is showing up sooner and sooner, right? And so I know one of Ishan's missions in life has been the mission around Philip Spruill, who's committed suicide around bullying. He was only, what, 8, 9? 11. He was 11, excuse me. And so our children at this young age, when we talked about, and how many of you recognize this, every generation talks about how each new generation is faster than the other. They pick up sooner, right? The same thing applies for mental health, behavioral health, depression, all of the negative things.
That's a great segue.
Hi, my name is Danette, and my husband's actually on the board, but I do a lot of volunteering. I lost my son to suicide 4 years ago, 20-year-old. And I think what I would like to say, and it's been said here, is not only to have an open forum for these young men and women really to talk, but to have it where you're listening. And I think we're all scared to ask the questions, and we're all scared to really say, like you mentioned, how are you? Are you thinking of harming yourself? The fear is if I say it, I'm going to give them an idea. That's not true. So, and one of the things Patricia and I talked about earlier, so my son, my husband and I are still married, grew up, father was very involved, but he couldn't talk about it. And we didn't know there was an issue. And we talked to our children at very young ages about sex and drugs and drinking, and did not know we needed to talk about mental health. And I think that is something else when you talk about fatherhood and checking in, and it's just something that needs to be discussed. But I think we also have to be able to hear it. It's a very hard to hear, and we all want to fix. And you can't always fix, you just need to be there. And so that's one thing I think AFSP is good for. We have a lot of resources, because if you haven't been in it before, you don't know what to do. So you ask for help to help your loved one. So thank you.
And can you give the website information or social media where people who are watching later can just contact
Yes.
you or reach out?
So it's afsp.org.
Yeah, this time I'd love to just open it up for, conversation throughout the crowd. Just pass the mic along if you want.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I want to kind of go back to just a couple quick things that was said. So you talked about the whole incarceration piece, and particularly around like the visits. And I think that one of the things that kind of stood out to me is even now, so I have a mentoring program for girls, and one of my young ladies' fathers was incarcerated, so he's recently released. The struggle has been the relationship with the mother and her new relationship, and how that has been an interference. So you had a father who is incarcerated but wants to be involved with his child. So during this whole time, they talked on the phone, so she has a relationship with her dad. But the moment that he was released, her mom has been blocking that relationship. So when we talk about the impact on families in incarceration, so here you had a dad who really wanted to do, and be with his child, and a child who wants to connect with her father, and then you have a mother who is creating a disconnect. And so even for us as women, in our responsibility in helping to foster relationships and not creating a block for our children to have relationships with their fathers, regardless what our relationship with them is, I think is really important, and that's not talked about enough as well, because there is a dual responsibility that we have. So you were just talking about, like, it's not just any one parent, both parents are necessary, and I think sometimes that's often missed, because to your earlier point about what society teaches us is who a primary parent is. So conversations with women become like, well, I'm the mom, I do everything, right? Even when the father is there, like, well, what does he do? I wash clothes, I do this, I do that. And so we have those conversations so casually, but kids pick up on that, right?
Now, can we say something in the room? I would love for some of the women in the room to comment on this point, because where do we find the balance between an overwhelming denial and neglect with regards to responsibility that a lot of men are exhibiting versus the detrimental effects, the negative effects of weaponizing our children? Because I don't even think we have that conversation where we try to find that balance. And I don't think it's my place as a man to really have that conversation unless we talk about the neglect part. But in terms of that, because we all know sisters who got good men that they will penalize the men by not letting them see your children. I've seen people arguing on the street and say things like, you ain't never gonna see him. And like the statistics that were shared, there's so much more to it than your relationship or even an economic, responsibility. You're literally abusing the child and I don't know, I guess I just want to hear some women's voices around this issue, because it's really difficult for a man to say, well, this is what y'all do, or what about? But it's bigger than that. I think as we try to wrestle with accountability, we got to be honest enough to try to balance out the accountability in a way that's best for the next generation. Because the children don't benefit from us not showing up or us not being around, but the children also don't benefit. Because like you said, if I'm watching the child for 10 years, it's difficult to come to a sister who's been doing everything for a decade. A dude just got home, and he might not even be on the right path, and to share the statistics like, well, he still needs to spend time. That's a real difficult conversation to have, so I would like to hear from the sisters, how do we make some progress in that area? Because a lot of people think that that's acceptable, and they don't see it as abuse. And they literally have said things like, if he doesn't pay, he can't see his kid.
So I'm gonna say to that, for me, I think a lot of that is our own untreated trauma, right? So our own experiences with our fathers, our boyfriends, our husbands, the relationships that we have had with men shape how we shape those experiences, right? How we have those experiences. So being honest about some of the stuff that I may not have resolved, it may not even be necessarily about you in this moment. But my struggle to receive anything past what it is at the surface has to do more with me, probably, and less with you. But I don't think that even as women, as many conversations, because it's always said that we talk a lot, right? But what we talk about may not always be of the substance that it needs to be. So some of the conversations that we've heard growing up just become the next conversations that we have. So it doesn't even, we kind of shape our own experiences based off of things we've already heard and now expect to happen. And so I don't really expect the change because it didn't happen before. And so I'm gonna kind of project what I think is going to happen. And sometimes it's legitimate, right? Like everybody doesn't come out and they're great. But there are exceptions, and I don't think that we allow enough for the exceptions. So for me, it's kind of changing that conversation about what is my part and what is my role in that. How have I been hurt? Is my hurt justified in this particular situation? Have I addressed that with him instead of addressing it through my child? So that's me on that. I don't know if anybody else wanted any other.
I think that what she said, and as I said earlier today to Rap Professor, I think that was an excellent question, and I really appreciate your response to it, because our issue, a lot of what we're dealing with is learned behavior.
Yeah.
And until we realize that what we are learning is also poisoning in us too. And so that now we have become a detriment to the child, because you are denying the child something that child needs in his life. So how do we rise above that and get a real serious look at that? And it's going to take a lot to make that happen. It's going to take a lot, because there's a lot that's making it happen, but it's going to take a lot to undo that. And what we're not getting is, as I was talking with you earlier, part of what's not happening with us is the conversations. We have events like family reunions, we have barbecues, we have a lot of times when families get together. And what do we talk about when we go to those events? Do we talk about anything that's going to really be something that we can take home and grow with, or grow by? Many times we go to those events and we gossip. We talk about everything except for what's really going to make a difference to us as family. So the conversation, that conversation, and questions like the one that the Rap Professor just asked, and asked for the females to take a look at themselves, and just like you got to take a look at yourself, the man got to take a look at themselves too. But we do have this false identity of being the masculine, superior person based on strength and sometimes size, but that without realizing that our thoughts have been corrupted too. And we don't really realize the real true role we have to play as a benefit in society, and we limit ourselves because of lack of understanding. So,
Can I address that as well?
So let's let one sister chime in and then we'll
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so for me, what I'm looking at is it's about a few things: relationships, trauma, and conflict resolution. I ain't nobody say conflict resolution, because if we learn how to resolve conflict, a lot of this stuff will go away. We need to learn how to resolve conflict, and it should start at preschool. I think conflict resolution should be a part of health. It should be for everybody, whether you work, whether you train, whether you play, whatever you do in life, conflict resolution should be a part of it. Because if we learn how to resolve conflict, half of the thing is over. We have to learn how to resolve conflict. We have to learn how to deal in relationships and learn how to be relational. Because if you have a kid by her, and you also have a kid by her, and she had her neck, and we need to learn how to resolve that. We need to have conversations about relationships. It needs to start very early. Age appropriately. Let's have conversations. What does it look like? That's your father, that's your mother, that's your stepmother. We need to have, and so how to get along with these people? How to get along with first your mother and your father? Because if your father says something about your mother and your mother says something about your father, how do we resolve that? How do we have good relationships? What does a healthy relationship look like? We need to see that. We need to role play. We need to roll that out, and so that you can see what it looks like from here. Because if you're in the yard and you're in the yard with all the mess, it's normal. It's your normal. This is normal for me. I mean, it's what we do every day. So unless you look at it from outside, when you look at it from outside, it looks a lot different. So a lot of those things are things that we really, really need to look at. And if we don't look at those things, that's why somebody can't get along and you shoot somebody. And a lot of times, it's not even about anything that happened that day. It's about the trauma, unresolved issues from your past that you never resolved, ever. And so when we look at those things and we say, wow, you know what? It really wasn't that deep. But now I'm locked up. I'm doing time for something that wasn't, and it wasn't even about you. It was never about you. It was something in my head since I was 7, 8, 9, 10 that never went away. And then for us women, maybe we need to start asking y'all, do you want any more kids? Or do you want kids at all? Before we get into these relationships with people that we really don't care about. Because it looks good, or he looks good, or she looks good. And we get into these relationships with people that we really don't care about. You know, and so we need to look, it's a whole well-rounded thing that we really need to look at. And once we start looking at these things, and we start acting them out, and we start taking it seriously, because it has to be taken seriously, then in a lot of cases, we can move forward. But until then, it's going to be messy. And we don't have time for that. We really don't.
I just want to, this is where I get to plug Focus on Fathers, because we actually have sessions geared towards conflict resolution and understanding co-parenting. And we have a whole course on co-parenting called Remix. But the thing that I wanted to ask of the ladies is, how many times have you heard conversations with your girlfriends, friends, other women, where the conversation about the baby daddy comes up, and this thing comes around like, well, he's just supposed to know. Like, he's just supposed to do. This is what a father does. How come he's not doing that, right? But when you look back at what you just said about relationships and who you laid down with, if you look at who they are as a person before you laid down with them, did they have that role model? Did they grow up in a family? This idea, and I appreciate what you shared about family reunions, but how many of us have been to a family reunion within the past 2 years? One person in the room, right? And so the reality is, even that's waning. And so our society is falling apart around us, but we're still talking about concepts that are almost antiquated. Like what you were saying about, you know, the bravado, the machismo that a man brings to the conversation. I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day, works with an organization in the city, does a lot of really good work, but he told me about a conversation he had with his son at the time who wanted to drop out of school. I said, okay, what did you do? I punched him in the mouth. Hey, wait a minute. That's not how so did you find out why he wanted to do that, right? So again, when you talk about conflict resolution, the household is operating dysfunctionally. So they're not learning it in the household. And also, if you think about how we often go about the process of meeting somebody that we're interested in, courting, dating, making babies, right? There's usually not this getting to know process anymore. And so we don't know who we're making children with. We're not developing that relationship. And so then you have to then go backwards after the child is here and piece everything back together, right? And it's not to say that doesn't work, that can't work, but we're now a divided house. And what's the saying about a divided house? I can't stand.
Just to finish with my comment. So when we talk about these conversations that need to be had with even our young people, And so today I had a conversation with a group of young guys, about 5 or 6 of them. It started off because they were standing outside of the rec center smoking. And I work at the health center that is diagonal to the rec center. But I just engaged them in a conversation about driver's license, because we're giving out physicals for driver's license. But from that conversation, I took them to the other end of the playground. Actually, they went to the other end because they were smoking, so they had to move. And I went over there, and I sat with them. And I just started talking to them. I don't know these boys. Well, I didn't. Now I do. But I didn't know these boys. I just went and I engaged them in conversation. So I let them know that, one, I cared. And as we were talking, like, one of them was like, you know, like kind of looking all crazy. And his friend said, listen, she just came and sat with us. Like, she didn't judge us. We were smoking. She didn't say anything. She just offered help. Like, she's real genuine. That was from 5 minutes of conversation. Those are the kind of things that the young men and females that they need, that we're not doing. You know, and this is why they feel like they can't talk to us. It's not that they don't want to talk to us. And to your point, Danette, about listening, like being able to be in that environment and just listen. And so what I heard from them is that they weren't working. What I heard from them is that one of them said, I really want to get my GED. But had I just dismissed them as some guys who they smoke, I wouldn't have known that one of them has almost a 4.0 and has a desire to go to Howard University, and he's interested in a million things. And another one is interested in photography, and he's interested in, they're both interested in music. And be able to say, okay, look, well then you can come to the health center, I'm having some events, so I want you to do photography for me, and I could pay you. But we don't know those things because we don't have those conversations with the guys on the corner. You know, we make assumptions about them and around them, and we have these kind of conversations about them and around them, but not to them and not with them. So it's not about me talking to you or at you, but me talking with you and getting to know you. And if I can start having those conversations about the things you care about, school, work, get money, all of that, I can start having those real conversations about how are you? You know, like, what's really going on? And so one sat there and opened up, because at first he was like, he had some school stuff and some legal things happen, so he stopped going to school, and he didn't get into it. But I said, yo, I'm not here to judge you. Like, I don't really, that's not really my concern. He was like, well, all right, so this is what happened. So I was selling some weed, and I got caught, because I was really in a messed up situation and I needed some money, and it's the way I knew how to get money. So even though he was in college, so we talk about the education, he got to that part. We didn't solve the money issue though. We didn't solve his real needs at home and how he was taking care of himself. So now he ended up in the system. And so now the cycle where he was able to escape, he's now sucked up in. So these are the kind of things and the support and the conversations that we have to have with our young men. And if I can do it and just walk up, they didn't know me. They know me now. They all have my cell phone number now. But that's the kind of way that we have to open ourselves up to the young men in the community and females in the community.
So thank you for sharing that. And we always knew you were awesome and amazing, right? But so I just want to, like, I don't want to discredit or downplay what you did, because that's amazing, that's phenomenal. There's a lot of people that don't have those social skills, and they don't know how to they don't know how to approach that, right? When I have conversations with people who are concerned and want to do the work, a lot of times in our community, and y'all know this, we all know this, let's be real, is we talk about them like that. You talking about they over there doing, they ain't got no, they don't have no sense, they, right? But we never look at how they got to that point. Where were they when they were 7, 8, 9 years old, right? I hear this all the time because I do a lot of work in public schools across the city. People are always talking about, well, where the parents at? If I share with you the number of statistics of children in public school who are in foster homes, who are couch surfing, who don't have stable families, so they don't have a parent or an older person that actually is trying to impart some wisdom like that to them, and then combine it with the fact that we're talking about an absence of father figures, role models in the community, to then be able to even get to that point to have the conversation, people aren't even mentally in a space to know how to do that. Right? Because when you see a bunch of guys, and we can all be honest with each other, think about to yourself, when you see 4 or 5 guys on the corner, your immediate instinct, or some of us, may not be to run to them, may not be to approach them. And even if it is, it may not be mindful enough to not judge them, right? And so we need those skills. We need to be able to have conversations amongst ourselves like this so that we then know how to approach them, right? Because like I said, I'm talking to a father the other day who's part of an organization that's all about strong black men. But when he told me, not only he told me he got in a fight with his son because his son wanted to drop out of high school, he then admitted to me, I was losing the fight, right? So now you're not even achieving what you thought you were going to achieve, and you've now ruined that relationship with that son. So one of the other things I want to share is I learned about this. I had a chance to meet a doctor from CHOP who's been doing research around gun violence in children. They said through their research, the number one most important factor to young men when it came to the idea of carrying a gun was older female relatives in the household, not the men. Because in their mind, these young men are carrying guns sometimes for illicit reasons, right? But most of the time because they feel like they need to either protect themselves or protect their family. And so it's when the mother, the grandmother, the aunt voices the opinion and shares and says something about that boy having a gun that he feels most compelled to put the gun down. That's statistical information that CHOP has actually gathered.
As we close, I want to make sure that the people who haven't got a chance to speak, and in the closing remarks, you can definitely chime in at this time. So I want to make sure everybody who wants to have, their say. And if not, we'll have Brother Hines, you can pass the mic to Ishan.
On both of the subjects.
Okay, yeah, so.
I'm just brief on both of them, on suicide and also with women. Just to speak on the women part of things, and just from experience from a father that I know who's been kept away from their child, I just think that women have been conditioned to be so hard now that they don't know how to lighten up. They don't know how to be soft. So when somebody hurt them really bad, they're using their hurt to hurt that man to feel their pain and feel their hurt, and they're forgetting the child in between time. So like if we can just, we get so many things about, like even if we did commercials, whatever, about like how we do about suicide and everything, maybe do more a family-oriented like commercials, and I know that we probably don't have the resources to do it, but if we run into someone that can promote this or something about how family is important, how father is important, how, something about moms not keeping the father who wants to be into their child's life, something on that line of things. And also I wanted to talk about the media, we lost our social skills, that's why a lot of times some of us can't talk to some of the younger children that's walking up. And I do praise you for going up there and speaking with the young men, but I have some men that, I work on a field every day, and I run across young men all the time who's out in the streets, and you do want to talk to them because sometimes they want to engage into a conversation with you too as well, but we have our guard up so much, because there's so much crazy stuff going on in this world that you don't know their intentions and what they're going to do to you. And it is sad that you have to feel that way. I had a young guy who came up to me and wanted to talk, but the whole time I'm trying to move my pocketbook away because he's constantly looking me up and down while he's talking, and it's hard to engage into a conversation when you feel threatened. And, and it's a shame that you had to feel that way. And the last thing about suicide that I wanted to speak on, I actually had to deal with that with my son. And I don't want to be that parent to come and speak on it, but it's a lot because of his father he wasn't there, after we divorced. He divorced the family, and then he had a new family, and my kids would witness him spending so much time with his stepchildren and not with him. And I kept them busy. I kept them in sports. I have really good sons, but I didn't know how much. I knew it used to hurt them, and I would talk to him and speak to him about it. But when he learned to love, a female, they weren't allowed to date until after they were 16. But once he started to get his heart engaged into a relationship, I really feel like when he was heartbroken, made him depressed, and he went to a point that we were out looking for him because he was talking about driving into a wall. And when I got that text, it hurt so bad, and I tried to get help for him, but I called the suicide hotline. I followed the prompts and everything that you hear on TV and everything, but there was no help for him, to be honest with you. They would tell me to go admit him into a hospital, but him being a teenager, me personally and we talk, we have open dialogue all the time, but at the time what he was wanting was, I think, someone of his peers to sit down and to relate to him, to be able to talk to one another and not judge him. Not to, whatever he's going through on social media, he might say a little, but then he get the harsh comments because people hide behind who they are on social media, and it doesn't help. So I took him to Penn, and then when he was there, I noticed that this wasn't for him too, where I needed to take him to get the help that I needed, because he's sitting there and he's looking at a lot of people who are mentally ill, jumping up. They might be on drugs. They're doing all these different things. And he's like, I don't belong here. And I'm looking at him like, yeah, you know what? You don't belong here because your issues are totally different. You just want to talk. You just want to relate to someone. And I don't think they have that for young teens, to be able to be in a setting like we are, to be able to vent, and then have that teen to be able to share the same story that they have. And, where they be like, what, it is okay to be hurt, by a female. Or, yeah, his father wasn't there in his life too. So, maybe, I'm not in this by myself. Maybe we can help one another, just for teens to feel that. I couldn't find that, and that's what I was looking for, for him.
Let's let Brother Ishan close us out then.
Monica, I do suggest that you talk to them. Would y'all have some resources that could benefit her with talking to between? Okay. One, this place is for the type of healing, or a place of healing that Monica was just talking about, a place where we can come and we can talk. Over the last few months, we've had people in here sharing some very personal experiences, sort of like the one Monica just shared, where there's been a lot of tears shed in this room. Even my own personal experience, just a lot of y'all, I've told y'all about how I was back in October when I was very, very depressed, but I didn't tell y'all about when I was going through things in end of March, and I was actually in a place where Aaron was talking about, where I was having this, I want to just stay in this bad place type of experience for several days. And I remember back in October actually reaching out and throwing up smoke signals saying, I want to leave here, right? And that caused a chain reaction of like all this overwhelming love from family and friends, and people just came to like my rescue, and it was good. It got to the point it was actually overwhelming. It was so good. You know what I mean? It was like I couldn't sleep. People were knocking on the door, coming to visit me. I'm like, I got to sleep. I got to work in a few hours, right? But when I got there again at the end of March, I was convinced that if I did that and said it again to people, that they would just think I'm crying wolf or whatever. So I said, let me do this a little bit differently. And I actually I did have my mind made up really to take my life. And you talk about like not really being vulnerable or showing like some things that have going on. I had my mind made up, and I didn't, but I'm also afraid of hurting myself. But I wanted to be gone. I just didn't want the pain to continue. So I actually went online and looked up ways to like go peacefully. And one of the things that helped me is on this website, which was telling all these ways to go. It actually said help on there, right? And it was saying that most people, if they feel this way, after 3 days, don't. So give yourself a chance, whatever, right? And I remember every day for 3 days feeling like I'm leaving. This was the last weekend in March, beginning of April. And I'm sorry, it was the last week of March. And I remember on that third day, I was like overwhelmed, so overwhelmed. And I was like, I'm leaving, right? And I think Nipsey Hussle died that day. And I just remember it was like this social media became a distraction with all the talk about him that day. And I went from, by the grace of God, I got through that, right? But then I went from having 3 terrible days to the following weekend being like 3 of the best days I ever had in my life. And it was like that following weekend, I was like, dang, I would have missed this. Like I went to, my favorite singer is Tori Kelly. She did a concert on Friday, April 3rd. Then Saturday, April 4th, we were at Kirsten's health fair, and I got a chance to meet all these amazing people from the community. And then on April 5th, I got a chance to celebrate my, I'm sorry, I did the dates wrong, but it was 3 consecutive days. My grandma turned 90 and they had a birthday party. And it was just like, sometimes we just, the grief is real, and we are entitled to have grief, but things have to change. Even the good, the highs that we feel, those will change to lows, and the lows will change to highs. And how we deal with the ebb and flows of life is very important, because none of us are exempt from that human experience. And some of us, while low, can reach up to somebody who's up, and somebody who's up can reach down and pick up somebody else. But it's important that we have compassion. It's important that we have a willingness to listen to other people, a willingness to speak truth to power, a willingness to do all kinds of things that could really bring about a change within people. You know what I mean? Like, it's good to hear all the things that were talked about tonight, but I just want you to pay attention to what's going on in your own heart, what's in your own mind, and don't be afraid to speak your truth to somebody. We do have to leave out of here. I encourage everybody to come out next month.
Yeah, I was going to say, just give me the information for those that are watching too,
Yes.
when they can come and join these meetings.
The next month event will be on Wednesday, July 10th, and that will be from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. in this very same library. This is the Blanche Nixon branch, 5801 Baltimore Avenue. We'll be here every month on the second Wednesday of the month, but the next date that you'll have will be July the 10th. We'll be here doing a focus next month on creative arts and creative and performing arts, on how those actually play a role in helping us to get through things. I know, Aaron, you're the rapping professor, so you know being creative, it plays a role in how you can communicate to people. Some people may be able to receive a message from you in the form of a poem that they can't hear in a speech. So come out next month. I'm going to be doing some spoken word. Of course, we'll have resources here for suicide prevention and different messages to encourage one another to live, all right? So I'll see y'all next month.
All right, for the final thought, make sure it's really fast, because we got to get them out of here, but make sure that you come down, and as Brother Ishan shared, just join in the sharing and the growing and in the sense of community that we all need, and you keep hoping and keep going. And a lot of people around this table have been in the place that some people who are watching right now have been in, and we've been in doubt, we've been in grief, we felt periods of hopelessness, but we didn't give up, and we just urge you and encourage you to keep on living and just keep on trying and to stay focused. And even if you don't have it to give anymore, just believe that a better day is coming. Show on the go, rapping professor with love and caring. We believe in you. We love you. It's going to get better. Keep hope alive. Take care. Appreciate y'all.